Got a project coming up that will need proper spline cutting jig, so I've decided to build one. The maximum width I can go and still have enough material to build this thing is going to be 20 inches. Each side will be 12 inches high, and it'll have T-track for locking the workpiece down in place. Got my dado blade set to cut a 3/4 inch wide groove. I use my T-track to set the height of the blade, so the T-track should be recessed just a little bit into the bore. I got my fence set where the top of the T-track will be 4 inches away from the V in the sled. Since I'm not mitering these two pieces, I'm just going to butt them square. This one will be cut at 4 inches. This will have to be cut at 4 3/4 to wind up 4 inches in the same location as this one. Okay, maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. I guess you'll see in a minute. Gotta cut all three pieces of the T-track. These are 24, and they need to go down to 20, and then one of them's got to go in half. I'll be using that one to go right in my miter gauge slots. Okay, I'm using the same trick everyone else does for attaching the slides to the back of the jig. I've got some washers underneath the slides to raise them up above the table just a little bit, and I've got double-sided tape stuck on the slides. Knock this down and keep it square. So in order to get perfect alignment on the slides, I wasn't able to use the pre-drilled holes. I had to drill my own holes and make the hole in the bar just slightly wider than the screw for adjustment. I ran the screws almost all the way down and dropped the tracks in the slots and came from underneath and tighten the screws while the slides were in the slots. That's the only way I could get the alignment good enough. Okay, I've got my pieces with the T-track locks in a clamped together, and I got my square clamped in to keep them at 90 degrees. This will be the part that turns up to a V to run across the blade. And I've got to be sure not to put a screw dead center where it's going to hit the blade. And I've got my screw holes marked. I'll be putting a couple screws on the ends, but the clamps have got those covered up right now. So I'll go ahead and do the ones I can get to. Once I got these two pieces assembled, I realized that they were just a little bit too tall. So I took them back to the table saw and cut them down to 10.5 inches to make them the same as my wedge pieces. I'm not going to be putting splines in trunks, so this thing doesn't need to be so huge. Even using 1/2 inch screws, I've still got the tips poking through on a few of them. So I'm going to grind those off. I don't like having those little sharp points sticking out. Grinding wheel's about worn out. I need to get another one on here. It has a more square edge. In order to attach these triangular pieces as easily and accurately as possible, I've set up a little clamping jig here. Got this board holding one of the triangles in the back, and then the other one's butted against this board. I added a couple clamps to help stabilize this thing. The one block in the back just wasn't quite doing the job. I have guidelines drawn on the back of this piece showing where to align the triangle pieces. I've got my holes marked out, so I'm going to drill those. Get these things attached. Alright, I'm going to spin it around and do the other side, and then I'll be ready to mount it to the base. Scrounged up some triangular pieces, scraps that I had left over to help clamp the base to this top part. I've got all my holes marked, so I'm drilling them with a regular bit first instead of the countersink because my screws are long and I want to get a full depth hole drill. Put 3 more screws in each track. It didn't seem to move, they're still working fine. I went ahead and hit my slides with a little bit of paraffin wax, and it's moving nice and clear. So now I've got to make some locking blocks to keep my boxes or whatever I'm putting splines in place. After making my initial test cut, I've decided that my sled needs a little more support on this end. I'm not sure if over time this will wobble, spread, tighten up. But at any rate, to make sure that it doesn't, I'm going to put a piece across here just to add a little more stability. It'll need to be 4 inches up from the bottom in order to make sure I've got plenty of clearance. The blade at maximum height only comes up to 3 1/4, so I'll make sure everything is above that, everything I don't want to get cut. Like the T-tracks, I've got a good 1/2 inch clearance between the top of the blade at its maximum height and the tracks. So I'm going to put this at 4, and that'll be good. So what I'm going to do is take out this center support and then notch it for this piece to fit in, and then I'll screw this in to each end. That should add some stability. For a test, I made up another block and I snagged one of the clamps off of my mortising table. And I believe that's going to do the trick. I don't have any extra ones in the shop. I'll have to order one, but I think that's what I need to hold my workpiece in place. That way I don't have to deal with any external clamps. I can use this block on the left side to square the workpiece, and then just use this setup on the right to hold it in place, and I think that will work. So yeah, that's centered. The piece was stable, not showing any signs of moving around. I believe this is going to work. With the jig being so tall, I'm not concerned at all about where the blade comes through in the back, because my hands will always be up here, nowhere down near the blade. I've seen versions of this jig where one side is a good bit shorter and it looks a little bit scary, but with this being so high, it's not a problem. For someone who's shorter, that might need a shorter side, you could probably add an extra piece like this just on the other side of the blade to make more of a guard. I don't think I need it because I just can't imagine any reason I would ever be putting my hand down here, because I want to guide it up on the top. Okay, I believe that is it. Thanks for watching.